If I hadn't been paying attention during this interview, I would have introduced it with this piece of data. Currently, the amount of waste material generated by construction and demolition activities in the US is approximately 600 million tons per year. The data will be even larger in the next few decades because new construction is expected to reach 2.5 trillion square feet by 2060. However, this interview has taught me that the most advanced companies within the field of waste and resource recovery are already moving forward and they are removing the word waste from their vocabulary, which I think is a significant learning point in and of itself. Today we are talking about a company whose mission is to make the word resources discoverable, easily transferable, and more valuable in our global economy. Rheaply was founded in Chicago, but they just closed an incredible partnership with the Carbon Neutral City Alliance and the City of San Francisco to develop an online platform that enables Bay Area businesses to access building products and other resources efficiently. Today we talk with Cecilia Smith, Senior Solution Engineer and Project Lead for the San Francisco Partnership. Keep listening and enjoy. Sustainability at Work is a podcast about sustainability in the workplace and in companies. My name is Samara and I've been working with sustainability for almost 10 years. Hello everybody, welcome to Sustainability at Work and welcome Cici. How are you? Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I am very, very excited too because I came I discovered the project of Rheaply a few years ago. I was working in my previous company and I got to hear your CEO speaking at a panel and I thought it was an amazing project. And then a few days ago, I saw the press release about the San Francisco partnership and I thought that project was immediately becoming more and more powerful. So I really wanted to talk with you and I think you are a great fit for this podcast. So let's dive into it. Okay, great. So what is Rheaply and how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Rheaply's origin story actually it goes to our CEO, Gary Cooper. He used to, do a lot of works in labs, and he noticed that, there were a lot of resources and lab equipment that was underutilized in the university. And so he would basically kind of put things that he wasn't using anymore on a red cart and go around from lab to lab and see, hey, do you want anything on this cart? Do you want to put anything on this cart? And it became a way for the lab community to share resources. And so Rheaply basically is the same concept, just put in a platform technology. And we basically help organizations share resources that they have that may be underutilized or that may have reached their kind of quote unquote end of life status for that individual user. And so they can either share internally throughout their organization, or we also facilitate resource sharing across many organizations and communities.
So how does it work? How companies are working with you and what is the source of revenue and how they pay you?
Yeah. So we have enterprise commercial businesses that work with us. Many of them may be using the platform to share a variety of different types of resources internally, like, laptops that they're exchanging, furniture that they want to keep track of from building to building or even throughout the building. And so the technology facilitates, kind of a marketplace, if you will, internally. And those customers will approach Rheaply and have a contract with us. We'll do some design and discovery with them. And so sometimes they may be able to, hit the ground running with the platform as is. And so at that point, then they would subscribe to the platform that exists already. And then for others, they may want to integrate with some of the technology that they already use internally. or they may want to add some features. And so we'll do some design work to, discover their processes, design a feature for them, and add it to the platform. And so they'll, kind of get that customization that they need, and then continue their subscription to the platform.
Okay, very interesting. And I wanted to know if there were other partnerships before that on a city base, and how the San Francisco one came to be.
Yes. So another partnership that we've had was with the city of Chicago. And that was during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We basically stood up a marketplace to help small businesses share the PPE equipment and masks and things like that. And so that kind of was, an example of where we were using the marketplace to connect small businesses, but it was being kind of sponsored and hosted by a government entity. And so the City of San Francisco project is very similar in that way of, the environmental team basically sponsoring a what's called the Bay Area Marketplace, and it will facilitate the exchange of building products and building materials between, all different types of stakeholders across the built environment, nonprofits, and things like that.
And how is this supposed to start? When? Sorry.
Oh, so we've actually already started the program, so we're super excited about that. Right now, we're in the design phases of understanding what the requirements are and trying to kind of vamp up the platform to really facilitate more of the building products exchange, which is a little different from some of the other materials that we've been exchanging on the platform. And so yeah, we've been going for about 3 months now.
Okay, congratulations. And I've seen that also Gensler is part of the partnership. That's very interesting, this idea of bringing them together from the very beginning. It's a huge company, so.
Yes, we've been interviewing a variety of stakeholders, Gensler included, to get more understanding of what are the drivers and motivations for reusing building materials. What are some of the ways that they can be reused and repurposed, and then really trying to understand the supply and demand dynamics necessary to try to make a building exchange, building material exchange work. So talking to contractors and understanding, what do you need for people to take things away on site? Is there paperwork that they need to fill out? Would you be able to use this tool to, take pictures of materials that you have that have been deconstructed, and then, a receiver like an architect could look at those materials and say, I want that trim work, or, wow, there's a lot of really great, windows we could recover there, doors we could recover there. So just trying to kind of connect the supply and demand side has been really important. And so, Gensler has definitely been very helpful towards that.
Mm-hmm. And so talking a little bit about partnership, because I've seen also that your CEO, Gary Cooper, was especially talking about the network, the idea of the network. Also because he was studying neuroscience at the very beginning when I think he had the idea. And so he was talking about this idea of the network, which I think in the circular economy is really fundamental. So how did you build this strong, very powerful network of partnership with your company, and how important it is?
You're right. It's so incredibly important. It's definitely very key to circular activities in general, but also creating a sustainable circular economy where it becomes so advantageous and so, economically beneficial to recirculate and share with community that it is chosen over other means of, getting rid of material or disposing of materials. And so, the network aspect, we have a ecosystems team that really specializes and focuses on building the network. And it's, really trying to understand, again, kind of the supply and demand nuances of different types of materials, how to connect, suppliers to receivers and those in need. And then just doing a lot of advocacy and campaigns. So, working really closely with nonprofits, understanding their needs and, making space for those needs to be surfaced to others who may not understand, how able they are to meet those needs by, things like furniture that's kind of sitting in the corner that, no one's been using for a while at a large organization. And so it's really just kind of doing a lot of outreach, doing a lot of, email campaigns, marketing campaigns, and then really at the core of that, listening to what others need, listening to what their pain points are. Sometimes pain points you can understand from like the undertones of what's being said, but not, the actual overt language. So just understanding what those needs are and doing a lot of listening, a lot of asking questions.
Why the partnership in San Francisco came to be? I'm looking at it from the European maybe viewpoint. Maybe it's not so. We know that California is more advanced in most of the environmental legislation, but is that the only explanation why San Francisco became one of your first partnership together with Chicago?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say the city of San Francisco has tried to think very regionally about the approach. And you can kind of get a hint of that from, what they've named the marketplace as the Bay Area marketplace. And to try to, really kind of unite, not just San Francisco, but, other surrounding areas, Palo Alto, like other communities, to really be able to participate in the exchange and have more of that kind of regional synergy. There are a lot of policies around, demolition and disposition. Most of those so far in the United States have focused a lot on, recovery of recycled content or, separating commingled content and things like that. And so the driver of this program is really to think about our embodied carbon usage and in terms of our buildings. And, we have so many buildings, we're always building more. There are a lot of, renovation projects, especially with, the COVID-19 pandemic and the way that we're kind of restructuring, the built environment. There's been a lot of work from a carbon standpoint on increasing operational energy efficiency, but less on embodied carbon and thinking about materials and how they can be reused. And so that's really, one of the key drivers. And, in order to have a policy kind of linked to reusing materials and trying to, minimize the embodied carbon impact, there's a lot of data that's needed. And so this is an opportunity to, really try to facilitate a materials exchange, understand what is required to set up a local material market, and particularly to do so with reusing commercial building materials versus residential building materials, which there's a lot of that reuse kind of happening where those local material markets exist. And so this will, provide us, some of the inputs that may be required in order to create a policy that can be successful, whether it's, identifying which materials are most available and able to be deconstructed safely and reused. Maybe that's steel, maybe that's wood, which ones do we have the greatest supply of in our buildings already? And which ones are going to be in most demand by, architects, designers, nonprofits, things like that.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned a lot of material, and I think this is one of the biggest challenge. You're working with different assets. Each one has different characteristics. I mean, it's just crazy. And I think technology is helping you a lot. We interview another company. It's a young startup from the Netherlands, and they're creating a marketplace for fashion, for sustainable fashion. And they are all based on artificial intelligence and super technology algorithm to be able to labels correctly everything they have and remarket it to the right people. Is the role of technology in your organization similar to this? How it has changed the gameplay?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So our marketplace technology is designed to, kind of resemble some social media, like there's a news feed, for example, that allows you to, see what's in the marketplace. You have the ability to customize, just like, on your social media tools, you can kind of subscribe to certain people and follow them. You can subscribe and follow like certain types of assets and materials that you're interested in. And then, we also have these kind of, alerts and notifications in the platform as well to, bring you back to see what's new, alert you when, someone has messaged you. So we've really focused on, trying to do a lot of like connecting of those types of synergies and provide the baseline, type of requirements that are necessary to facilitate a marketplace. Some other things that we're exploring include like gamification. So, getting points for certain activities that you do within the marketplace, and specifically trying to tie those to the embodied carbon reduction from, reusing those, like a laptop or reusing whatever those materials are, and giving that kind of instant gratification to the user. We kind of have that instant gratification in, other areas, like, if you go on Amazon, or you have so many ways to like instantly buy and instantly receive. And so, trying to replace that type of, mind frame and that type of behavior, but with reusing from a marketplace that is, circular, where there are other, communities that you can connect with as well in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. I think what I really love of your project is that you're creating not only a marketplace, but this idea of a social media network.
Right.
It's also very peculiar because in Europe, I've heard of companies that are helping other companies to manage their assets in specific moments when they need it. But a continuous network where you can keep having this mindset of exchanging assets, I think it's really something new. It's the first time I've heard of it. And this take me to the difference between Europe and the US. And I was very curious to know about that, because in my understanding was that the circular economy was not so strong in the US. It's very strong in Europe, but it's also because it's very pushed from the country and the European level. So how it is changing in the US?
Yeah, that's very true. And, I think we're seeing more embracement and even like use of the verbiage circular economy in the US, especially from a regional approach. I really do think that maybe it's become a little more prevalent and top of mind because of the ongoing pandemic, and, communities trying to, share and trying to understand, places where there has been inequity in the past and the impacts of that. And so, how do we take the resources that we have in our community and make them, available, make them accessible, make them known, so that they can be shared, and so that we can, kind of share them within our community. And then, that definitely has some benefits, from a climate aspect of, instead of, trying to seek for materials, somewhere halfway across the country, like, let's see what materials we have here. Let's try to use local materials. Let's try to repurpose furniture that others are, no longer using. We have a tendency sometimes to buy a lot of surplus. And so what happens to that, like, let's give those items new lives, and let's do so within, our community, and really, bring up and uphold our community. And so I think, the city of San Francisco definitely is one of those kind of champions in that regard of, being the government to sponsor this marketplace that is really designed to facilitate exchange between, small businesses, large enterprises, designers, nonprofits, all different types of stakeholders, but within a regional approach.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And you talk about embodied energy, and I'm going to ask you if you can define that for those who don't know. But you also talked a lot about gamification and collecting data. And I think that is another big challenge where technology can for sure help you, but I think it was a challenge at the beginning, I imagine. How do you get the data um, that are so different, because you're talking about different materials, different assets, different entities selling and buying? How do you collect this data? Is a huge challenge.
Yeah, those are great questions. So I'll start with the embodied carbon.
Mhm.
So, buildings produce a significant amount of carbon for a variety of reasons. They consume a lot of materials. They have operational carbon, which is the impact from things like, your HVAC system, the air conditioning, your lighting, all of those things that help to like power the building. And then the embodied carbon is really kind of the remaining carbon impact that comes from emissions from, extracting, manufacturing, transporting materials, doing the actual construction itself. And so within the built environment, generally embodied carbon, since it's tied to the materials, in the past, there's been a mindset that there's little that we can do to reduce that, because once the building is stood up, it's just kind of there. But we take buildings down, we do renovations on them, and furniture, fixtures, equipment, those are, all the things kind of inside of a building that are usually movable and that get replaced a lot. And so those are ways that we can still, have an impact on reducing, the carbon impact of the built environment overall. And so with the building exchange, building materials exchange, that's, really what we're trying to do is to, find new homes for those things, and, kind of use buildings that we've had that have, materials that could be deconstructed, find new homes for those materials in new buildings. But that's right. There's a lot of different types of materials that are in a building. I would say that one of the things that excites me about this project and the technology is that I think it's the right time for it. There's a lot more information about building materials available than there was in the past. We also use building information models and, different software tools that are designed to capture a lot of the data related to the materials of a building. And so, since those building information models have been around for a longer period of time, we're exploring pulling the information about those materials out and giving them to, someone who's going to reuse that material, so that they have the data and information that they need in order to make a decision about reusing that material, in order to specify it in their design drawing, if it's a new building or if it's a renovation, things like that. And then I really believe that, only by trying to inventory and try to, reuse these types of materials can we actually create that data. We have to start somewhere, right? And so by, trying to do the regional exchange, and by, getting contractors and projects and commercial building owners involved, we'll be able to assess and understand, what are the materials that are most prevalently available for reuse, what are the ways in which they are being reused. A lot of that requires that we actually go through the motion and activity, but not just that, because those types of actions are happening, elsewhere, but that it's aggregated in a kind of centralized place where, the community can have access to it. And so, we're really trying to work to, be the kind of the hub of gathering that information, trying to estimate the carbon reduction impact from being able to reuse those materials, traceability, where did those materials go from? It was in this building, it's now in this building, things like that, which really requires that you have, a concentrated effort, but that the data is collected in aggregate in order to have the scale you need to understand, a market, and whether you can, generate a circular economy based on that.
And I think it's amazing because you're building a library of knowledge, which also should inspire better design.
Yes.
From the very beginning.
Yes, that's definitely, one of our goals, and one of the things that, we're trying to really tackle here is there's definitely a temporal importance of, if you're taking a building material and trying to put it into a new design, then, architects have to be engaged early on in the design process when they're, showing precedents, design precedents and images and visionary, designs to their customers, right? And those building owners are making decisions about the aesthetic and the type of materials that are going to be used, the performance qualities needed from those types of materials. And so, having the marketplace available will make it so that, architects can kind of look in the marketplace and see what's available. The city of San Francisco also is working on supporting with some physical infrastructure as well, because we understand that, a commercial building project can be like, 12 to 18 months. It can be even longer than that, depending on, the scale and type and size of the building. And so, how do we kind of work with the temporal approach to, make sure that receivers are getting the materials at the time when those materials are becoming available from, other construction projects or, from other surplus that, was ordered and left over, from another construction project. And so, but, again, like having that kind of concentrated, one place where people can go and really shop for and kind of see the materials and understand the supply and demand and those schedules becomes really important towards making that happen.
And I think it's also I would talk forever about this, but it's also interesting because there's a tendency here in Europe, they're starting to talk about building as library of materials.
Yes.
I don't know if it's common in the US, but I think it's really amazing and it's really looking at the future.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely.
And you are contributing to this for sure, because you're really creating that library of knowledge and of material too, but of knowledge also to approach the problem from the design standpoint, which I think it's very powerful. But I wanted to finish up with a little bit with your experience and how you got to this position and this company, and what did you study? How do you become an expert on material and an expert on all this mechanism of the circular economy?
Yes. So my background, I live in Washington, D.C. now, but I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, and lived there most of my life. And then I went away to school to Syracuse University in upstate New York, where I studied architecture and political science. And after that, I, went back to Texas and decided that, I wanted to work for architecture firms. So at first I worked for a firm that did mostly public architecture for designing schools for universities, K through 12. And then after that, I worked for a firm called Lake Flato Architects that specializes in sustainable design. And so I definitely learned a lot about, how do you build a really high performance building, and, the importance of using regional materials, and, the idea that from a design aspect that, the region should look very emblematic of its place, that you should, feel that kind of sense of local community and regional expression of materials, when you visit cities. And so that was very exciting for me. And, because we were doing a lot of R&D on different types of, ways to think about materials or ways to use kind of advancing technologies, I became, very interested in, smart cities and the idea of using sensors to make the built environment better. And so I, decided I wanted to learn a lot more about some of these advancing sensor technologies. You talked a little bit about, some of the artificial intelligence. I wanted to learn about those things too. And so I moved to DC and actually went to work for a startup that does a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning type work. And so I was a program manager for some intelligence community customers, and got to know a little bit more about government work. And then after that brought me to Rheaply. I wanted to kind of take the things I had learned about, how to use different sensors and how to use, software technology to improve and provide great outcomes. And I joined Rheaply really to help focus on this push towards improving the built environment and kind of leveraging technology to do that.
Amazing. And one last question that I always ask to all guests. Is there a place where you recharge your energy? Is there a place that inspires you every day?
Oh, that's a really good question.
It could be nature, it could be artificial, it could be a building place, a building.
Yeah. I try to spend at least a consecutive 30 minutes outside every day. Just like walking around. I don't know, I love being outside. I'm a very sensory person. And so, DC is great because there's very kind of different, distinct, but also blending neighborhoods. And you can also be in DC, Maryland, and Virginia all within the same day. And so as a Texan, where you could drive for like a whole day and still be in Texas, I appreciate that. But I try to spend at least a consecutive 30 minutes outside and just kind of, sightsee, listen to sounds, people watch, imagine, the story of the people that I'm watching. It just helps inspire me and recharge.
Great. Thank you very much, Cici, for this conversation. It was very interesting. I would go on forever, but we have finished our times. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I hope to see much more of your development and the company development very soon, because it's a great project.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.